This is that center that's out of the C150, the Starlet. And I haven't pulled the grenade pins yet on the little locker. But if we have one CV underneath, and we've got the diff center, and then the other CV on the top. If I turn this, see that, Peter? With the spider gears moving like that means that it's still open wheel. So this one would be like one wheel locked on the ground, and then if you were doing a burnout, this would be the spinning wheel. That's exactly what happens. So now if I go and pop these grenade pins, it's literally as simple as using this screwdriver. Just pop them off like that. And then on the other side, you heard that click? Now we have limited slip. That's really hard to turn. So this isn't a locker, it's a limited slip. So limited means minimal, obviously. So if I try and turn this CV with one hand, it's not happening. But if you do two and push it really hard.
So it's really hard.
Really hard, which means less likely for one wheel to break out and wheel spin. So if we put this in together now in the gearbox and put it back in the car, it should pull two-wheel burnout pretty easily now. And remember, this was only like 35 bucks. All right, let's roll. Hey guys, it's Matt and Peter again. Today we're going to be talking about Toyota transmissions. This is a C150 out of a Toyota Starlet. And if anyone's been looking up trying to get LSDs available, if anyone's been looking up LSDs for these, there's a Cusco and a couple of others available, and they're really expensive. A mate of mine, Rick Bartley, he's from Victoria. He has the 500 horsepower Starlet. I'll chuck his Instagram link on somewhere on there. He gave me an idea and said that there's actually an LSD which Honda guys in the States have been using for a while. It's called a Phantom LSD. Now what that is, it is two little plates, machined to have four little springs put in there. And what happens is you get this unit that had these, I call them grenade pins, because if you pull them out, it's going to explode like a grenade and spring apart. And what you do is you get this and you slide it inside your diff center, pull the grenade pins, and the force pushes the springs and the plates apart, and it forces it onto the outer spider gears that have the splines in there for the CVs. So I've got one of the CV shafts here. I've removed a little clip just so we can pop it in and out. Usually you can slide that in, and you'd be able to turn this, and the gears in here would do their thing and spin. So the point of an open diff is it allows the wheels to move at different speeds, and what that means is it makes steering easy if you're going in car parks and around corners and stuff like that. In Nick's car we've done a welded diff, and because we've welded that, it's made it an absolute pain in the ass to turn. So I think this is going to be a really cool thing if it actually works. So when you go and buy these Phantom LSDs online, these are intended for a Honda, which I'm assuming Honda diff centers are a little bit larger than the Toyota Starlet stuff. Here we've got an auto center, and to fit this LSD in, the Phantom LSD, I had to grind down a surface on each of the side of the spider gears, so then I could slide that in and release these grenade pins. The Phantom diff then pushes apart and it pushes force on the outer spider gears here, giving you that LSD drive. Now we can see this one here, this is the C150 from the Starlet, and physical body size is a lot smaller, so there's a lot more things we need to machine down to be able to get this to fit. I've looked everywhere on eBay and this is the smallest one I could find, but I am worried about if those gears rub on here too much, is this gonna, because this is steel, is this just gonna pour, you know, bits of metal through your gearbox? We don't really know. So today we're going to install one of these into the C150, and then the box will go into the green car, which is the daily driver, and I can just drive that around and see, you know, maybe I'll put a couple of magnets in there, or, you know, check on the standard drain plug, see if we picked up any metal at all. So that'll be pretty cool. These were $35 from China, so hence why I bought three of them at the same time. If this works, to fit this yourself, there's a few different tools and stuff I got here today. Hydraulic puller, every workshop's got one. If you don't own one, I'm sure there's a workshop that'll be able to lend you one. And we've just got basic things like a rattle gun, 10mm socket, 12mm, a couple of screwdrivers, a shifter, a 6mm Allen key to undo the detents. So even if you don't have a Toyota gearbox, the same principle applies to most front-wheel drive gearboxes. What you need to do is pull your gearbox apart, and what I did was I measured how much room I had in between the spider gears and pretty much jumped on to eBay, looked through a few different listings on this and found one that was very close. I did have to machine down about 1.5 millimeters off the gear to get it to fit in there. But other than that, for 35 bucks, it's a pretty cool LSD conversion if it works. So first up, I've pulled off this little plate. This is just the end plate of the gearbox. It's just a heap of 12mm bolts. Put that aside. I've then used 10mm socket and removed off the Synchro ring and the fork, shifter fork. I've set up the hydraulic puller in here now, and I used a rattle gun with a 27mm socket to pull off that nut. We'll just put that aside for now. Before we can pull this, so this is the 5th gear Synchro, before we can pull this off, we need to pop this little circlip out the back there. Now if someone's standing behind you, there's a good chance you'll flick this out and they'll lose an eye. So you want to put a rag behind it like that, and we can use these screwdrivers and just pop the ring into the rag, and that way it won't go flying. There we go, see that? There we go, no eyes lost. We have top clip. Cool. So we got all the pullers set up now, and we'll get the shifter and we can just wind this up. There we go, it's coming up. Oh, we're so close. Oh yeah, we're off, there we go. We want to put that up the same way that we pulled it out. So then when we go put it back together, we don't stuff it up. So now we can go ahead and pull these gears off. This is 5th gear. And you have Synchro. Then you have the gear. Then you have the split bearing here. Again, just keep it all together. Slide it back in there. And there's a little shim there. Now if you decide to pull this apart and you actually get stuck, there's a really good YouTube channel called the Armstrong Family, and there's a guy that knows these inside and out and pretty much has these gearboxes down pat. So if you can't work out how to put this back together, or you get stuck pulling something apart, probably best just asking him. So again, we'll set up the rag there just so we don't lose this next clip. So this clip's holding on to one of the shifter forks. So what it does is when you're selecting gear, it doesn't let you go too far. Catch that. Look at that, rag caught it. Awesome. Next thing is, get a 12mm, and then there's 5 of these bolts. I've already loosened them just so we can get through this quick. Quick. Then we need the puller again for this 5th gear as well. Don't try and put a screwdriver under there and pry the gears off. I've tried it before, and actually you chip parts off the gears. They are hardened steel, but when you try and put a screwdriver under there, they will break. Another one years ago, I wanted just the gearbox case so I could do a dummy install for the blue car. And I thought, oh, I can't be bothered getting the puller out. So I thought, oh, I know the gears will break, so maybe if I just hit it with a hammer, I can just break the gear off, pull it all apart, and away I go. So the gearbox is on the ground. I'm standing there with a hammer like this, straight over my head like that. It hit the gear and exploded, and a piece of it went in straight into the side of my leg. And before I could even put the hammer down, there was blood just coming out the side of my leg. So I went to the hospital, and the guy's looking at it. The hole would have been about the size of like a grain of rice, so it was tiny. And the doctor's looking at it, and he goes, I don't think there's anything in there. And I'm like, I'm telling you, the amount of blood that came out there, it was pissing out. And he still refused to do an x-ray or stitch it up or do anything. He just said, oh, just put a band-aid on it, it'll be right. And I'm going, no, something's in there. And he's going, no, wouldn't do it. And I just begged, please do an x-ray. They did an x-ray and checked it, and yeah, there was a piece of steel in there. Again, it was probably, it looked like about the size of a fly, so it was tiny, but point is I still had metal in my leg. So anyway, then they got the ultrasound out. Peter, when they're checking in women's stomachs for babies, they got the ultrasound out, the gel and stuff, and they're trying to find it. Anyway, they got the tweezers in there, and they're in there trying to dig it out and stuff. So, point of the story, don't go hitting your gears because it'll end really bad. The puller legs I usually use, I don't know where they're gone, and the problem is these aren't thin enough to be able to fit under that gear. So I found this old dodgy looking thing, and now that doesn't hold on properly, so I've had to improvise and put a set of vice grips on there to hold the teeth into the gear so it doesn't slip off. Now I'm hoping this can hold on to it tight enough.
I don't know why, but this sounds like something Nick would do.
Oh, we're off, Peter, we're off. It ain't stupid if it works. Oh look, we're on, we're good. See? Right, Peter, that's off. Plate. Peter is going to be pro style at gearbox rebuilder by the end of today.
We're on.
We're on. Circlip. These are different sizes, so you don't have to worry about mixing them up. Yes, just chucking them over. Alright, now we can go ahead and undo. There's a heap of 12 mils that hold the cases together. I've already loosened these off. Cool. And there's 3 more in the belly. Flip this over like that. Before the box can come apart, there's another 12mm around the back. And from memory, it holds onto the reverse gear shaft. We're going to take that out. There's a little washer on there. Stop gearbox all leaking out. You want to keep that all together. There's also a heap of D10s. The D10s, that has a spring with a little ball bearing. So when the shaft's sliding up and down, just see this one here, the shaft will slide down and the spring pushes the ball bearing out and it locks it into that divot. Now these springs, they're all the same size, the balls are all the same size, so just put them in a container so you don't lose them. This is probably better to be using a magnet. Spring, little piston I guess if you call that. Let's roll them out.
Ball bearings.
Yeah. Probably should use a magnet to do that, but yeah, I get a bit excited sometimes and just jump the gun. When I first tried to pull one of these gearboxes apart, I didn't know about the D10s. So I've pulled everything else off and I'm trying to separate the box, and the casing comes apart probably 5 or 10mm and will not go any further. And I couldn't figure it out, trying to pry it apart, whatever. These D10s were locked in. Once you removed all these, the gearbox case will just separate like butter. It's easy. Another ball. See, this one's all the same size. It is a bit daunting when you start laying everything out, trying to figure out where it all goes. It can only go back together one way. So by the looks of it, we've got all the D10s out. It's all looking pretty good. I did forget to mention that this part here is what the shifter cable goes onto to select the gear. To remove that, there's 4 bolts for that, and you must remove the bolt that's on top. It has this style on it, so that would slide in, it locks in. So if you undo these 4 bolts, that will not come out until you pull, it's like that style thing out. I've already used it on something else, so don't have that anymore. Okay, let's put up the catching rag again, and we got one last circlip to pull off. If we got a good friend, you can stand behind and catch it. There we go. Caught it. Believe me, these will go flying 20 meters across the room like a bullet, so the rag's a really good idea. Gentle tap, let's give it a go.
Gentle tap.
I like to use these outer casting marks in the gearbox. It gives you room to put screwdrivers and stuff onto. Don't try and go straight in like off the bat, because you'll just damage the gearbox. This surface has to stay flat, so then when we go to reseal it, we're going to need to use a paper thin thickness of glue, and there we go. Alright, so ready to come off. Easy as that. if you hadn't pulled those detents out, it will get jammed on these shafts and then it won't come out and you'll just be there frustrated trying to figure it out. Alright, so there's our diff center. It'll be looking like that. This is out of an automatic style of gearbox, but it's still the same concept. So to get this out, we're now going to pull these gears and shafts and things like that off, which is also pretty straightforward. Alright, first of all, this is reverse gear, the little bracket for it. This just slides up out of the way, like this. Just keep those together. This is reverse gear as well, a little shaft for it. Just put that out of the way. I don't know the correct terms for these, so don't drill me on it. Now we should be able to grab this whole lot, both shafts, all the gear sets, give it a bit of a jiggle, and it should come out. Now, if you pull this apart and actually start separating stuff, good luck to you. I've got no idea, and I've never pulled them apart before. So keep them together like that. And yeah, like that. So we can just pick it straight back up and slide it in there when we're done. So here we are. That's what it usually looks like. So pretty much now we go ahead, get the verniers out. We can measure the distance. Just get one of these plates like this. So you can already see, Peter, that it's hitting on both gears there. So what I had to do with this gearbox was I had to grind the gears down a little bit. These outer gears aren't so important for what we're doing. And then, yeah, put the plate in and away we go. So you can see like this, it's sprung apart, so these springs are pushing the plates away. You wouldn't be able to get in there now if you tried. But if we grab this one that's already got the spring in it and holding it together, that just about slides in there. So you will have to do a little bit of modification to those outer gears. Like a millimetre or two is completely fine. Now you want to hit this down just far enough so the pin comes out the bottom and releases the spider gear pin. See how that's coming out? We don't want to smash the gear off there, so just keep tapping it down. There we are, released. See, it's right on that gear. So now we pull this pin out. When you put this back in, it only goes in one way. That hole must line up with what we just bashed out then, so we'll just sit this aside. Now, these spider gears, they rotate around like this. One comes out. This isn't that scary, so don't freak out. And that comes out. There's a shim on the back of each one. Then each gear has its own little shim. So this is where it comes into play. How much do we actually need to machine off this to fit it? So we'll put the top gear in there. We'll get the set unit. And it won't go in there. So the best way to do this is you get a pair of verniers, you measure the thickness of this, and then you go and measure the thickness, what you have here. And whatever the difference is, you need to grind down off each of these gears, just off this face. So then when we try and slide this in, ultimately it'll look like that. We'll then pull the grenade pins out, pushes apart, pushes these out and up against their shims, and then you end up with your LSD. Now if we look at the dimensions of this, the bottom width is 45 millimeters and the height when it is compressed is 26 millimeters. This is both plates and all the springs. And then the height when it's fully extended, sitting like that, is 30 millimeters. Now when we look at the Toyota diff center, the little one, we need a maximum height of 24. So when this is compressed, it's 26. So we need to get that down to 24. So the first thing we need to do is take 1 millimeter off each of these upper and lower gears. That way our height then will be correct. But then the problem is we're still too wide. So the width of this is 45 millimeters, and we need to get that down to 38. I don't really want to just go and machine a whole heap of material off those outer spider gears there. So solution to this, the black lines there that I've marked out, we're going to go and grind that down, and that represents 1.5 millimeters each side. So that'll reduce us 3 millimeters overall, and that would take us down from 45 minus 3, that takes us 42. We still need to take another 4 millimeters off somewhere so we can fit it in that 38 millimeter gap. So what we're going to do then is we'll take 2 millimeters off each of these side gears, and then we can reassemble this. The compressed one should slide straight in, we can pull the grenade pins, and then we're going to be good to go. The way I think I'm going to do this is we'll pull this apart, pull this gear out, and then we go ahead and get our verniers like this, and we measure what this thickness is. So we have 16.42. Now we need to take 2 millimeters off that, so we want to get down to 14.4 or thereabouts, and then that's going to be good to go. And we only want to machine it off this front flat face here and not off the round edge. That needs to go back on there with the shim and go back together. We then have the same thing for the larger gears. Same thing, basically measure across the face of those. 23.58, and we want to take 1.5 millimeters off each one of those. So minus 1.5 will be down around about 22 millimeters. Then do the same to the other two gears, and it should be good to assemble and go back together. So we've got the standard plate here, this is 45 millimeters, and we've got to grind it down to around about 40-ish. And I just wanted to leave a little bit of meat on the side here, just so the springs don't fall out when we go and put them in. That'll still work good. So when you machine down these side spider gears, just take your time. I don't want to be responsible if you stuff your diff. Once you machine this part, just try and fit it in, and if it doesn't fit still, then you just have to take a little bit of meat. It's around about 1 millimeter off each of these spider gears. But then when you're at this stage, you'll see the standard one still won't fit in there. If we get the machine down one. That fits in there nice and snug. Yeah, we need to go ahead now and machine down this other one, and we can reassemble that. Slip it in like this, pull the grenade pins off, and away we go. So there's a comparison between the original one and the one we've machined down. Now, it should slip straight into here. Like that. Now once you put the center in, you've got to get this pin, and the hole here has to line up with that pin so we can knock it back through that hole, and then it'll hold the whole lot together. So in here, that first shim behind the spider gear needs to be lined up, and once you do, this will slide straight in like that. Slide it straight through the center. Once you've lined the hole up with the pin, just put a screwdriver up under here and hit down there. There we go. Center that's out of the C150, the Starlet, and I haven't pulled the grenade pins yet on the little locker, but if we have one CV underneath, and we've got the diff center, and then the other CV on the top. If I turn this, see that, Peter? With the spider gears moving like that means that it's still open wheel. So this one would be like one wheel locked on the ground, and then if you were doing a burnout, this would be the spinning wheel. That's exactly what happens. So now if I go and pop these grenade pins, it's literally as simple as using this screwdriver. Just pop them off like that. And then on the other side, you heard that click? Now we have limited slip.
So it's really hard.
Really hard, which means less likely for one wheel to break out and wheel spin. So if we put this in together now in the gearbox and put it back in the car, it should pull two-wheel burnout pretty easily now.